Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Crowley, and I have my co-host, Colin Martin, with me.
How's it going?
Today we have a special episode. It's the end of the NBA season. We're recording this right before the playoffs start. So we're going to have our playoff predictions and all our NBA awards. We're going to leave the NFL out this week. Pretty calm week overall. I already commented on the Odell stuff on our TikTok the other day. So if you're wondering about that, we got that out there. It's also on the YouTube shorts. And unless we get some more stuff picking up, we'll probably talk about that next week too, with the draft picking up. So today, like I said, we're just going to go through the NBA playoffs and awards. So with that being said, I think we're just going to start. Do you want to start off with the playoff bracket? I feel like we got a lot to talk about with that.
Oh, yeah, that's going to take some time. Let's get to it.
Okay, so first, we'll just breeze over the play-in games. I don't know if they have that much implication on the playoffs overall, but we can talk about that overall. The first game that we have as we're recording this, all the playoff games will be done, or the play-in games should be done by the time the episode comes out. So we're just going to talk about what's going on tonight, which is for us, the Hawks and the Heat game. Just to get this out there, I think the Heat are a lot better team. And I think the only way the Hawks come close and win is if Trae Young drops 45. I would take the Heat by like 5+ points in this game. I think they're a lot better team.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, Trae Young has historically had problems against Miami. Their defense kind of suffocates him. So I would take Miami easily in this one as well.
And then we have the Lakers and the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are completely falling apart. Like, this team is absolutely terrible. And before we talked about this too, I was talking about my preseason prediction for them when they traded for Rudy Gobert. I said I wasn't sure if they're going to make it out of the first round. And I actually meant the first round of the play-in when I said that. I guess I gave them a little too much credit. I think the Lakers take this game pretty easily. Even if the Timberwolves weren't falling apart, even at full strength, the Lakers are pretty good.
Yeah, and I have my thoughts about the Lakers. I'm not always the biggest supporter, but this is an example of a time where I would say the Lakers can't lose this game. I mean, being the seventh seed is a huge advantage to being the eighth seed in the West this year. LeBron and AD know that. I expect to win, and especially with Rudy Gobert not available tonight.
And then next we have the Bulls and the Raptors. So essentially this game, the winner of this game will play against the loser of the Hawks and the Heat, which we have being the Hawks. And this game is interesting to me. I think the Raptors are a lot better team, but I went with the Bulls in this game, which might be surprising, but I think that team has some good pieces and they have some pretty good playoff performers. I mean, we look at DeRozan, I think Zach LaVine will be good, and Alex Caruso, pretty good defensively overall. I think with a play-in game only being one game, I'm going to take them in this game.
Yeah, I think the Raptors are a really sneaky pick here. But with that being said, I think they know their season's over. I think they actually benefit from losing this game. They're not a team that can compete. And if I have a guy like DeMar on my team, he's not just going to sit back in a game like this. So I would also take Chicago here.
And then our next game, the Thunder and Pelicans, which will be the winner of this game will be playing against the Timberwolves for that 8 seed. And I'm going to take the Pelicans in this game. I think Brandon Ingram has been on an absolute tear recently, and that rotation of guards that they have. I mean, last week they had 3 players with 30+ points and 5+ threes. And this team is getting very hot at the right moment. Whether we see that move into the playoffs, which we'll talk about later, I still think this team is very good, even without Zion coming back. I think Shea will give them a run for their money, and I think it'll be an interesting game, but I think the Pelicans overall are just the better team.
Yeah, and I hate to sound boring, but I feel exactly the same. New Orleans has been a really good stretch recently. And like you mentioned just before, I think SGA is going to go out there and drop some ridiculous number, really try his best. But the Thunder aren't a playoff team this year. No one expected them to be. And I would say New Orleans, I think they are.
Yeah. And then next we have on the East for the 8th seed, we have the Bulls and the Hawks. And I just have this weird feeling. I think the Bulls are going to pull this one out. I talked about it with the Raptors too. I trust this team with the players that they have and the veterans that they have. I know it's only a play-in game, and with it only being one game, I like the Bulls in this.
Yeah, and we finally disagree on something here. I like Chicago. They do give me a vibe that they could sneak this game out, but I talked about Trae Young earlier. The Bulls don't have anyone to guard Trae Young. I mean, at Caruso, I don't know what his availability is even looking like right now. And Patrick Beverly, like, I'm sorry. I know he's known as the defensive guy, but I think Trae Young handles business. And, say what you will about him, but he performs in big games for the most part. So I think he'll at least get them to that 8th seed this year.
And then we have the Timberwolves versus the Pelicans, and very easy game for me. Pelicans. I don't think the Timberwolves are. I think they're completely falling apart.
Yeah, I think the Timberwolves, if they lose to the Lakers tonight, it's just there's nothing you can do at that point. They kind of already put themselves in this downwards trajectory. It was one knockout, and now it's all the way towards the bottom. And as you mentioned earlier and just now, the Pelicans are hot. I can't not pick the Pelicans in this matchup.
Okay, so that's our play-in games. They might be a little different, but I don't know how much the seeding will really overall change the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll start off in the West since we're talking about the Pelicans. So we have them in a first round matchup against the Nuggets. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Nuggets sweep this, but I think the Pelicans could sneak like a 2-point win out at home. They're hot, and if Brandon Ingram could drop 40 points and they could sneak a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Nuggets sweep them.
Yeah, I would very confidently say Denver is going to sweep them. Not only do the Nuggets perform so well at home, where New Orleans will not have a chance, they've also proven that they can beat the Pelicans in New Orleans. There's nobody on that team that can stop Jokic. I like the MPJ Brandon Ingram matchup, size wise. So I think Brandon Ingram, I think I think he'll show out for sure, but I don't think they can keep up with the Nuggets. I would say a sweep for sure.
And then we have the 2-7 matchup. This is probably one of the most interesting matchups that we're going to go over. The Nuggets and Pelicans, pretty easy, but for the rest of this first round, we might have very different opinions.
Yeah.
So the Grizzlies and the Lakers, I mean, these two teams are on completely different ends of where they are, like right now on a hot streak wise. I would say the Grizzlies obviously having all that Ja Morant issues too, and then also having everything that goes on with whatever Dylan Brooks decides to do on the night. I feel like there's no right answer in this series for me, but I'm taking the Lakers in 7.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't know. You know what? I'm not gonna be nice. Why not? We have the whole episode to talk about this. I was gonna say I don't know why. I do know why. The Lakers are hot right now, but if the playoffs was all about like directly who was hot, then whoever had the winning streak going into the playoffs would win. We gotta talk about actual matchups here. The Lakers can't stop Ja. Anthony Davis is gonna get absolutely locked up by Triple J. And we have seen LeBron take low caliber teams far in the playoffs. But this problem is he doesn't even have a low caliber team this year. It's just guys that don't show up every night. LeBron can fight against a lot. He's one of the greats, but he can't fight against dudes that are playing horrible every single night. And I'm not saying every Laker is going to suck every night, but in matchups with the Grizzlies, I think the Grizzlies have exposed the Lakers over and over again. I think it would be just utterly disappointing for what we saw from Ja Morant so far this season, despite all of his deal if he goes out in the first round. I think it's the Grizzlies. I really just do. And people point to guys like Dylan Brooks, like, he'll have to show out, whatever. No, he doesn't. Dylan Brooks can go out and drop an inefficient 9 points like every other night. But you still have Ja, you still have Bane, you still have Jaren Jackson Jr. The only thing that actually worries me is Steven Adams being out. That's going to be a big factor. If he's not going to be around for the whole playoff series, which it looks like he's done for all the playoffs in general, then I like, the Lakers have a chance. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but me personally, I have the Grizzlies in 6.
Well, I'm just if Jaren Jackson's locking up AD, who's locking up LeBron?
No one. That's the thing, though. You don't have to lock up LeBron. This is if I'm predicting how good. No. Hear me out. LeBron's going to go crazy. It's kind of the lesser of two evils thing here. Right?
I understand where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron can go out there and drop 40 every night. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if he did do that. It's LeBron. But you can't rely on him to win you the game every single game. You know what I'm saying? Eventually, your other guys got to step up. And I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is the perfect guy to stop Anthony Davis. And after that, you're looking at inconsistent role players. And I'm not going to bank on those guys to step up to beat the second team in the West in the first round.
I understand the other side, but I can't bet against LeBron in the playoffs. And I
No,
think
and
the team that he has around him, as seeing the teams that he's brought to the finals, I'm not saying he's bringing the Lakers to the finals. We'll go over that later. But I think they can come out against a team who's a little on the ropes right now.
no, and I respect it. I'm making this sound like it was an easy decision. It was not. The Lakers are one of the stronger seventh seeds I think we've ever seen in the new age NBA playoffs. But, I'm going to defend myself on taking a much higher seed here because I just think the team is better.
And then the next matchup we have the 3-6 matchup between the Kings and the Warriors. Another hard matchup to predict overall, but I'm taking Warriors in 6. The Warriors own the Kings. Steph Curry owns them, and I think it's going to be pretty easy pickings.
Yeah, see, this is the thing I hear from everybody. The Kings are just being thrown out for no reason. I don't understand. I understand Steph Curry, but he's been shaky with his health all year. Klay Thompson, I would say the same. He had a great game last game of the regular season. He had 15 points in 5 minutes, but you don't know what you're going to get from him. If it goes to game 6, you know what you're going to get. The rest of the series, we're talking wishy-washy. I don't think they have a big man that can even come close to matching up with Sabonis. And Fox is going to win the clutch player of the year this year. His clutch numbers are insane. For me, that bodes well in the playoffs. With that being said, the Warriors are still a really good team. The Kings don't have an easy chance at this, but the Kings are going to have the home court advantage if it goes to game 7. And my prediction is that it will, and they will win in 7. I'll take the Kings.
I want to talk about this matchup a little more. I think
Yeah.
Klay Thompson, I mean, he's averaging 22 points, shooting 41% from 3 this year. I don't think that's very shaky from a guy like him.
No,
I
no,
think
no. And
that's
don't. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way because I would not consider his season shaky. But you don't really know. Here's what I want to say. I wouldn't call him inconsistent, but when it comes to the playoff time, he's not the type of dude that steps up every game. And I guess nobody does, but I wouldn't rely on him in his older age to go out and beat the Kings necessarily. Because I mean, the Kings just have guys deep down the roster that contribute. And I don't know how the Warriors match up. I would say a lot of good things about the Warriors. I am a Klay Thompson fan. I'm a Steph Curry fan. I even don't mind Draymond Green. But with that being said, when we go farther down the roster, I'm not looking at dudes like Kuminga to step up and have great playoff performances. And then once we get deeper than that in the rotation, I don't really know. Are we looking at Anthony Lamb? Like, what are we talking about here? For the Kings, I like Herter, I like Barnes, I like Davion Mitchell, I like Malik Monk. When you get deep in these playoff runs, you need your stars, and then you just need dudes that can knock down shots. And Klay Thompson as a starter, he can do that, but he can't play the whole game. He's too old.
that's why they got Jordan Poole coming in for him.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about someone that I think is going to be consistent in the playoffs, Jordan Poole will be my last pick. So
I'm taking the reigning champions in the NBA, and I don't think the home court advantage plays that much into this, especially with the Kings not being great at home this year.
I think it matters if you go to 7. Throughout the rest of the series, I'm not predicting every team to win at home. I agree with that. If you get to a game 7, you want to have it at home. So,
And then the next series that we have the Suns versus the Clippers, and I got the Suns in 6. Paul George is going to miss the start of this series, so I don't think the Clippers are going to be able to come back from that. And the Suns, obviously, a very good team overall. Kawhi is going to have to try to keep this team afloat while Paul George is out. But even then, I still think they can win 2 games, especially depending on when Paul George comes back. But I take the Suns in this series.
yeah, this is going to be a hell of an episode. All right, I have the Clippers in 7. I know that sounds ridiculous because we always talk about on paper, and the legendary team of on paper is Phoenix. And they've been really hot with KD, and we know KD is a playoff performer. So why am I picking the Clippers? Because the Suns are still figuring it out. I'm going to be honest. The main 3 stars that we see on the Suns, I'm not even counting Ayton. I'm talking Chris Paul, Book, and KD. They've played together, but not as much as I would like to. I want to see more from them still, and we're in the playoffs. So I understand that they have a better roster than the Clippers, but the Clippers, despite Paul George being hurt, and we know how Kawhi is with his day-to-day stuff, I've seen them win close games. I've seen them figure it out at times. This is a 4v5 matchup. Neither of these teams are necessarily perfect on the year, but I like what I've seen from the Clippers recently. I just Kawhi has proven to me many times that he can beat teams better than his in the playoffs. I'm gonna stick with it. I don't know what it is, and I can understand any argument for Phoenix here. They're the higher seed, but I can just smell the Clippers upset from a mile away
I'll
right
give
now.
you the argument then. I
I'm
think
here.
I understand obviously not playing together, but if there's one guy in the NBA that I'm gonna take to just plug and play, Kevin Durant's that guy. Chemistry wise, I mean, they're undefeated with him in the regular season. I think they played 8 or 9 games overall, which is like almost the same as the big three played in Brooklyn. I saw some stat close to that. But I mean, if I'm taking a team, especially if Paul George is in this whole series, I think it's very different. I talked about the Clippers being a favorite probably a few months ago, but I mean, I'm Kevin Durant in the playoffs too. Chris Paul is he's going to do what he needs to do. Obviously, he's regressed scoring wise because he gets better passing, but he's going to do what he needs. He doesn't need to be the first option or the second option. So that's fine for him. I'm not worried about him. I don't know who's really going to guard Ayton, especially if they double KD, or I don't know if they'll double Booker. I wouldn't personally, but someone else might.
I'm gonna throw this out here, and it's not a name that's like they don't have a superstar center. I understand the point. Mason Plumlee can guard DeAndre Ayton. I'm just honestly, it's not. DeAndre Ayton has the advantage, but I'm not worried about that. When it comes to KD, he's one of the best players in the league, best scorer ever. I agree. If I'm going to plug and play a guy, I'm picking KD. But we saw last year in the first round against Boston. I mean, what does plug and play do? You mentioned how that Brooklyn duo didn't get much, or trio, whatever you want to call it, didn't get much time together, and they didn't, and they lost in the first round. You know what I'm saying? And I think Phoenix is a better team than that. They are coached much better, 100%. So that's why I'd definitely go into 7 in my scenario. But if I'm taking a guy, you mentioned KD is the best plug and play guy in the league. I agree. If there's one guy in the whole league I want to stop KD, it's Kawhi. So I feel like you could roll either way on this one. I understand. I'm picking an underdog here, and I don't expect people to see my way on it. But I really, really think the Clippers are being undersold in this matchup.
I mean, I just picked 2 underdogs before this, so I understand it.
Yeah.
And then if I'm taking any guy to lock up, who was it? KD, you said? I'm taking Jaren Jackson Jr.
I totally disagree.
So I guess this will be a little different since we have very different playoff brackets, but let's just finish the West. So we'll talk about our first round matchups. I'll let you start. We'll go through the second round, and I guess you can give your side, and then I'll give my hypothetical. I'll see how I feel about the series.
Yeah, so in my hypothetical side, we'd have the 1 seed playing the 5 seed with the Nuggets against the Clippers. Here, I just gave a lot of reasons to why I think the Clippers can go out and beat the Suns. But I've been saying this all year. I think the Nuggets are built for this. Now is the time. Kawhi will probably do well. I mean, at least, right? But his assignment is going to be Michael Porter Jr. Jamal Murray performs in the playoffs. Jokic is a much better player than Ayton, and you already had some worries about who's going to guard Ayton. So, I mean, shout out to Plumlee once again, but Plumlee and Jokic were teammates for a long time, and there's quite a big skill gap between them. So my point being, in my scenario, if the Nuggets play the Clippers, I have the Nuggets in 6. I still think the Clippers are a good team for all the reasons I gave, but I don't think it's going to be a super tough series. Like, I think 6 is fair.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't see in my world the Clippers beating the Suns, so I definitely would not see them beating the Nuggets. But I think I would even argue that even only 5 games. But it just depends on Paul George's health, I guess.
Yeah. Do you want to throw your Nuggets?
You can do your other second round, and then I'll do my second round.
Okay, cool. So at the bottom, this is looking a lot different than yours. I would have the Kings versus the Grizzlies. And this is where I expected to catch a lot of flack, but since we don't have the same matchup, I'll just say my piece on this. I think the Kings beat the Grizzlies. I really do. I think the Kings go from longest playoff drought in sports to Western Conference Finals this year. With this matchup, I don't like the Grizzlies in it at all. Once again, we talk about all the big names, Ja, Bane, whatever. I really like the Kings' depth. against the Grizzlies in this scenario. And Jaren Jackson Jr., we've been gassing him up a little bit this episode. Sabonis is the counterpart where I get scared if I'm Jaren Jackson Jr. And it's not because Sabonis is some dominant paint scorer. It's actually the opposite. I think it's Sabonis's ability to play on the perimeter without even having a three ball this year. The ability to get up in those high post scenarios and make decisions like Jokic-esque decisions with his passing that Jaren Jackson can only do so much. I mean, is he going to go out there in this scenario and block some of Sabonis' shots? Sure. But is he going to keep up with him on the perimeter when he gets into his playmaking mode? I don't think so. So in my scenario here, I would take the Kings in 7 over the Grizzlies. 2 tough series in a row for them.
I like that. I don't really have a strong opinion for this. I guess my only note listening to it, I would say it goes to 7, but I could honestly see it going either way.
Yeah. And to finish off my West before you give us your matchups, now I'll put the Nuggets against the Kings. Once again, I just think the Nuggets are the best team out here in the West. And in my scenario, the Kings have already played 14 games to this point. You could say that bodes well for experience. For me, that means they're tired. You know, guys are going to get beat up, especially in a physical series with the Warriors, and then debatably a more physical series with the Grizzlies. I think they're going to be worn out. The Nuggets, in my world, have kind of an easier path. I think they're going to be fresh, and I can't see the Nuggets losing against the Kings, if I'm being honest. So it sounds a little lame out in West for me, but I have the 1 seed Nuggets taking care of business. I would say 5 against the Kings.
Well, I'll give you a completely different West. There's no chalk in my West. So with my second round matchup, I got the Nuggets and the Suns, and I got the Suns in 6. Yeah. I know this is going to hurt you a lot.
No, it's just I'm not even surprised. I looked at the bracket and I go, okay, yes, Nuggets losing in the second round. I knew it.
I think I'm taking Kevin Durant. I think this team is built very well. I think I'm taking Kevin Durant as, the greatest scorer of all time, especially in the playoffs. I think he's going to go out and perform, and this team is built to compete.
Then why? Yeah, I like it, but what's so different about Kevin Durant this year than the Kevin Durant that got manhandled by the Celtics in 4 last year?
It's a different year. He's on a way better team this year.
That's true. That part is true.
He doesn't have to do everything this year. We saw him almost do everything against the Bucks and was 2 inches away from making the finals.
Hey, you know what? I respect the opinion. Again, I'll say the whole on paper thing. I think the Suns are a better team than the Nuggets, but it's just the Nuggets are a team that competed all year playing with each other. There's so much synergy there. I think that's how we see these clips of Jokic and Murray making these crazy passes, for example, because they buy into the system really well. So with that being said, I respect your opinion. I think the Suns.
The Suns have been to the finals too. They have a lot of experience too, and they're plugging in one of the greatest scorers of all time. And the Nuggets historically aren't that great in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we're big Monty Williams supporters on here. I think it's a very well coached team. So I can respect your opinion on that. I do see a world where this happens. Maybe I'm just a little salty about it.
And then my next matchup, I got the Warriors and the Lakers. Very interesting matchup on this side, taking both of the underdogs. And in this series, I think the Warriors get it done for the same reason that I had against the Kings. I really value that team. I know they're a lower seed this year, but they're still the champions from last season. And I would say they regressed a little bit. But if we're going into the playoffs and you start a series off, and it's a 7-game series with the Warriors team that probably has that trio, I would say probably has almost the most championship experience all time. You'd compare them to the Bulls championship wise and playoffs wise, even
San Antonio
experience wise. Yeah. And I just don't see them really, especially against the Lakers. I don't see them losing.
Yeah. And in your hypothetical, I love this pick and I totally agree. I mentioned Jordan Poole earlier in kind of a negative way, but he's came a long way, even from just last year. And there is a world where he really lights it up too. I just don't think the Lakers can keep up. And as you mentioned, and as I've mentioned quite a bit, there's a big coaching difference between a guy like Darvin Ham and a guy like Steve Kerr. Say what you will about Steve Kerr, but I mean, he's proven that he can bring that team to championships with his guys. And especially if Andrew Wiggins is on the way back, I I totally agree. The Lakers don't have a chance.
And then in my Western Conference Finals, I have the Suns and the Warriors, the 4 and the 6 matchup. And for, like I said before, if I'm looking at a 7-game series, I don't see the Warriors losing. And this might be a surprise. Having the
It is.
Suns, I think the Suns, this is kind of where their inexperience together might fall, especially to a team like the Warriors, just because, like, I mean, I just don't see Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond, and the rest of the pieces obviously losing in a 7-game series. And I think, I know it's crazy to say as a 6 seed, but we've talked about how different this West can go. And I mean, just looking at both of our brackets, how different this can go. The only matchup that I'm looking at on this first round, and I guess in general, is the Nuggets and the Pelicans, that I'm like, I would say that's even like, that's at most a 5-game series. I was nice and gave the Pelicans a game, but that could definitely be a sweep, like you said. Everything else, I think, is at least a 6-game series. And I have the Warriors winning in 7 against the Suns. I think the Suns inexperienced together, like I said, kind of just, it faults here. They made it pretty far, but next year they're going to be scary. And
Yeah,
so
and
I have the Warriors coming out of the West
yeah,
overall, I
I
guess.
respect that a lot. I might not agree with your picks, but I really like that one. I think it should be the craziest risk ever to pick a 6 seed to win your Western Conference, but it almost kind of feels right this year. So I respect the picks. They look quite different, but as you mentioned, it could really go either way. I had to think a lot about this side, especially.
So then I guess we'll bounce over to the East. And I would say the East, probably not as competitive. I'm not as competitive overall. I would say 1 through 8. Once we get through 1 through 4, completely different. But the first
Yeah.
round, first matchup that I have the Bucks and the Bulls in the first round. I think the Bulls come out on top of the Raptors. I don't care if it's the Bulls or the Raptors, anyone. Bucks are sweeping this series, I think, against the Bulls in my world.
Yeah, I have the Bucks playing the Hawks, and they're going to sweep them. They're going to sweep whatever team you put there.
And then we have the Celtics and the Heat. I have the Celtics in 5. I think the Heat, obviously these two teams have played a lot against each other. So I think the Heat know how to play against the Celtics. I still think they're going to lose in 5, but I'm going to give them 1 game.
Yeah, and I love that take right there. I have the Heat here, not have standing a chance. Yeah, I know you thought
Oh,
about it.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, no. So with that being said, though, we saw last year the Celtics and the Heat play some really tight games. The Heat aren't as good as last year, if we can be honest. The Celtics are debatably a little bit better. With that being said, Jimmy Butler always has a game where he goes crazy. He's going to have one of those. I think the Celtics in 5 is my opinion as well.
So then we have what's next? The 3 and the 5. Wait, no, the 3 and the 6 seed. Sorry. We got
Yeah,
the Sixers and the Nets, and I have the Sixers in 5. I think the Nets, I think they're going to pull out a game, especially with the way that the Sixers are. I think they're going to end up probably just dropping a close game, probably when the Nets are at home. Even when the Sixers a few years ago, they played against the Wizards ended up winning a game just because I think the Nets team isn't that great overall, but I think they'll be able to squeak out a game. I think, if I'm guessing, that game, PJ Tucker and Tobias Harris will combine for -3 points, and Embiid will drop 45, but no one else will do anything, just because the Sixers always have a flat game in the first series of the playoffs, no matter who they play. And I think it's against the Nets.
yeah. Hey, I did your guys a little bit more justice. I know they historically have that flat game, but they're not going against the team that should scare them by any means. I think, especially with how Embiid has been playing, he does like he can single handedly beat them if guys like Harden don't have a good game, or as you mentioned, Harris might not have a good game. I have the Sixers in 4. I think that's a sweep.
And then next we got the Cavs and the Knicks, a very interesting matchup regarding Donovan Mitchell. I think the Cavs are levels above them, but I'm still going to give the Knicks a game. So pretty much every matchup besides my 1 and 8 seed, I'm giving the other team a win. So I'm going with Cavs in 5.
Yeah, and there's a lot of heat around my area about how the Knicks are going to win the series, and Brunson and Randall are going to go crazy. That's just New Yorkers talking. The Cavs are a much better team, as you mentioned. They're 1 through 5. like in totality, is probably the scariest in the NBA. Position by position, they're top tier. With that being said, I think the Knicks could get a game, but for the sake of argument, I really think the Cavs are much better. I'm going to have the Cavs getting a sweep here, which is rare for a 4-5 matchup.
Yeah. So I guess from now on we have the same matchups at least that we
Yeah.
can talk about. So I got the Bucks and the Cavs, obviously the 1-4 matchup, and I'm gonna stick with my guns. I still think this matchup's gonna be really tough for the Bucks. I'm still gonna have the Bucks edge it out in 7, but I really think the Cavs are gonna give them struggles. And I've said this pretty much every time we talk about this potential matchup. And it just really depends on how the rest of the Bucks play. Like the team is really good overall, and Giannis is obviously one of the best players in the league. Depending on who you ask, could definitely be the best player. I completely understand that, but it just depends on how the rest of the team plays. How is Chris Middleton going to play? And I wouldn't be surprised. I have this going to 7. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs win, but I think worst case for the Cavs, this goes to 6. I don't see the Bucks dominating them in any fashion.
Yeah, and I want to give credit to your point before I say mine, because Cleveland really could win this series. There's a lot of things that can go right, and despite Donovan Mitchell in his history not going far with Utah in the playoffs, it has not been his fault. He is a consistent playoff performer, so that's even another notch for Cleveland. With that being said, Drew Holiday in the playoffs is, I'll say it, probably one of the scariest players in the whole NBA. There's something about him where guards do not score on Drew Holiday in bunches in the playoffs. That serves really well for a team like Cleveland, who gets their scoring from Mitchell and Garland more than anyone else. So with that being said, I think the Bucks figure it out in 6, but you really can't count out Cleveland. It feels weird because this is a team I look at and I'm like, wow, they could really make the NBA Finals. The problem is they have to play the Bucks second round. And I really can't discredit Milwaukee for putting together. I mean, you look at it, probably the best team in the league, right? So I have Milwaukee in 6. I agree with you, though. I wouldn't put it any lower than that.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, this Cavs team is a very sneaky team to make the finals. I think if they got past the Bucks, a matchup against the Sixers or the Celtics is very interesting too.
I don't think I don't think either one of our teams we would be happy if they played the Cavs. If we go
Yeah, I
see
would not. That's a very tough series. I think either way.
if we see the Cavs beat the Bucks, I don't want I'm scared for the Celtics, and I assume you're scared for the Sixers.
Yeah. So I guess we'll talk about that series now. Um, at first, I had the Celtics winning this series, but I feel like it would just be off brand if I didn't go with the Sixers. I think it's going to be a competitive series. I have it going to 7. I think I know if you look at the records from this year, obviously the Celtics going 3-1, but one of the games, obviously the Celtics won, but it could have definitely gone very different if the shot went in. And I'm not looking at that saying record wise. I'm looking at that if I'm the Sixers saying we can compete. It's a loss on the record, obviously, in the regular season, but it's a close game. If they get blown out all 3 games and then they only win 1 game because Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams are sitting, that's a different story. But they've been able to compete. And I guess my argument is that this is probably the best Sixers team since the Jimmy Butler team, and I would argue maybe even better than that team overall, just because the pieces that are on this team. James Harden is obviously playing his best role-making season in a long time, arguably ever. He led the league in assists this season, and Embiid is on another world this year. And I know he's not historically a playoff performer, whether that be because they play the Celtics almost every single year in the playoffs, or it seems like every year there's just a freak injury. Last year against the Raptors, being up 20 points with 5 minutes left, Doc is like, yeah, you're going to stay in, ends up breaking his orbital bone. But then the next game he comes out and makes a fadeaway 3 for the game winner. So it was okay. I could really see this series going either way. If I wasn't a Sixers fan, I think I would pick the Celtics, but I got to back the boys, and I'm definitely scared of this series. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to go under 6 games.
Yeah, and I have to stay on brand too. I mean, I think if we looked at the brackets and we knew what conversation we'd be having, With that being said, I would actually like to say good things about the Sixers to start with. I do think this team is better than the Jimmy Butler team, and clearly that team was about 5 seconds to travel away from making the NBA Finals. So with
I
that
would
being
say I
said,
would argue even winning the finals with the injuries that we saw.
I would actually agree with that. With that being said, I think the Celtics are better than last year, and last year the Celtics made the NBA Finals. So, I mean, we can't discount. I would like to throw out, as a Celtics fan who watches pretty much all their games, Marcus Smart is a lot worse than last year. So that's kind of an issue. But with that being said, Derek White is leaps and bounds better, and Malcolm Brogdon off the bench. Whether you look at his numbers and get super excited or not, he's a difference maker on the bench. He allows dudes like Grant Williams to actually have a bigger impact. So, with that being said out of the way, I think the Celtics would take it in 7 too. I mean, in the regular season, I would say Boston definitely had the upper hand because it was 3-1. And the one game they lost was by 2 when Embiid dropped 50 and no Jalen Brown or Robert Williams. I think there's going to be some Celtics fans that look at that and say, oh, okay, so they're going to sweep the Sixers. It's not that simple. It's playoff time. Different guys do different things. But when it comes to the playoff time, I think the Celtics are so dangerous because the Celtics love to not play two of their best players every single night until we get to the playoffs. And now they're looking at a full strength team. Full strength Celtics are really, really scary. I like the matchups. Joel Embiid is going to still go crazy. Robert Williams is a great defensive center, but he's got like 4 inches shorter than Embiid by kind of all accounts.
And probably 50 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Like Rob Williams is a smaller center. He's proven that he can handle himself defensively. Embiid this year just doesn't care, as you mentioned. Really doesn't matter who's guarding him. It could be Luke Cornett, could be Peyton Pritchard. He's going to drop the same amount. With that being said, I think the Celtics are a better built team. Say what you will about Jason Tatum in the finals last year. In the playoffs in general, he's great. We know Jaylen Brown's consistent every single year. We get that guard rotation going well. I think it keeps Harden on his toes. Harden's going to have to be guarding a lot of different types of guards. And I will say James Harden's defense isn't as bad as media will like to convince you it is. But when he has to, any guard that has to take on a bunch of different type of guys, depending on the possession, I get a little nervous. So to stay on brand and with those reasons, I'll take the Celtics in 7.
Well, I think an interesting point. I think why I'm going with the Sixers this year is that Embiid has, especially in the regular season, because obviously every regular season they play 4 times. This is his best performance against them in the regular season, win or lost. He's averaging 37 points and 12 rebounds in all 4 games. And I think that's going to be, obviously, he's the best player. That's the key to the series. But I do think the biggest thing that I'm going to give the Sixers in this series, and I think why I have them winning, is that I'm banking on the bench, which is usually bad for the Sixers, especially in the playoffs with the way that Doc Rivers likes to do his rotations. But this bench, especially with the defense that it provides to D'Anthony Melton, I expect to see him in a lot of clutch scenarios, especially guarding the outside. Obviously, I think Jaylen Brown's a better player than D'Anthony Melton, but if it's clutch time, I'm putting Melton on Jaylen Brown. I'm not letting Maxey or it's interesting with Harden out there. Obviously, I think you keep Harden out there with Smart out there. But if Jaylen Brown's out there, I think you put D'Anthony Melton in there. And the guard rotation has been great. Obviously, a struggle will be the big man rotation. Dwayne Dedmon's not going to get minutes in the playoffs. And the backup center is a very interesting role. Montrezl Harrell, not liked by Doc Rivers, so we'll see what happens. Paul Reed has been playing amazing recently, but
Doc doesn't like a single one of your backup centers. That's why you don't have one, because he won't play them.
That is also true, but that's why Paul Reed's a power forward, so he'll get his minutes.
Hopefully. With that being said, I just want to throw one more thing in there before we move on. I think you brought up a really good point on Joel Embiid having his best single season performance against the Celtics. You probably saw me typing all aggressively because I want to make sure I have this number right. Robert Williams only played in one of those games, and it was towards the beginning of the season. It was either the first or second game, if I'm not mistaken.
I would assume it would be the first because they played the first game of the year.
Yeah, so it was first. I don't even know if Rob Williams was healthy for the first game of the year this year.
It might have been the second one then.
Yeah. Point is, it was earlier in the season, and a lot has changed since then. So I will say Embiid has become a better scorer throughout the season. I don't think you can even argue that. He's been elite. With that being said, he hasn't played against Rob Williams in a long time. When Embiid has been doing well against the Celtics, it's been against Blake Griffin and Luke Cornett. And,
And Grant Williams.
Okay. Credit, he's 6'6". Credit to Embiid for showing out when he should. That's one of his best characteristics. He doesn't back down against anyone, even when it might look easy. With that being said, I got to see him against Rob Williams. I don't know how he played in the game that Rob Williams played. I don't have it right in front of me. I assume still pretty well.
He dropped 28 and 7.
Yeah, see, to me, that's not. That's a good game by all accounts. For most people, it would be elite. But
Yeah,
if the
I
Celtics
understand.
if the Celtics hold Embiid to 28 and 7 every game in the series, it's gonna be done before 7. So
So then the next series, I have the Bucks and the Sixers. I think the Bucks are a lot better than the Sixers. I still think the Sixers end up winning 2 games, and I think it goes to 6. But I'm gonna say even if I had the Celtics coming out of here, it's really hard to bet against the Bucks for me right now. But I'm sure. Well, I guess we'll hear your opposing viewpoint on that.
well, the thing is, it was almost not going to be opposing because it's hard planning against the Bucks. But once again, to stay on brand, I say, okay, let's consider the Celtics at least for a second before I just auto pick Milwaukee. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, Boston actually does match up pretty well with Milwaukee because when you consider all the great things I said about Drew Holiday earlier about how guards won't score on him, luckily Marcus Smart doesn't score anyways, so that's fine. So then, okay, let's put him on Jaylen Brown. That's actually a matchup I kind of like because Jaylen Brown, as you know, is closer to a wing than he is a true guard. And Drew Holiday just doesn't have the size for that. Obviously, the Celtics won't have an answer for Giannis. But as I mentioned earlier, when we talked about LeBron versus the Kings, you don't necessarily need a matchup for the best player. Sometimes the best player is just going to be the best player, and you work around that. Brook Lopez is scary as a defensive center. Good thing we don't have a center that can score. It's really going to be a battle of the wings. And although Giannis is one of the best defensive players in the league, which is why this team is so good, Tatum usually plays pretty well against him. I'm going to like to see what Jaylen Brown can do. And I trust the bench. Milwaukee has some bench pieces. I don't know how many guards they're going to bring off the bench in the postseason. I think Grayson Allen, but I don't even know if Javon Carter is going to get minutes. So we'll see what the matchups look like. But in my head, and considering how I think it's going to translate to the court, it's going to be a 7-game series to me. I don't see how it couldn't be. And I'm going to take the Celtics. I really have to put something out for them because I knew you'd have the Bucks as well.
So for my finals matchup, I have the Bucks and the Warriors. And I was saying the whole time, my argument for the Warriors, I'm looking at these teams and I don't know who beats them in a 7-game series. That team is the Bucks. I have the Bucks winning in 5, actually. I think the matchup is a lot different in this sense because there's no one that's going to be able to guard Giannis. And I mean, Giannis, we've seen him in the playoffs. And when he played against the Suns in the finals, he took it to an completely different level. And for a guy that's already one of the best players in the league overall, to be able to take it to another level, even in the finals too, is absolutely insane. And I think Steph Curry will obviously have some good performances too, but I'm giving the Bucks in 5. I think they're a lot better than the Warriors team.
Yeah, and I have the Nuggets versus the Celtics. I will say if the Bucks got here for me, it would have been a pretty easy pick for the Bucks. But this matchup with the Celtics and the Nuggets is a little more interesting. With that being said, if the Celtics can beat the Bucks, I think they can beat the Nuggets in this scenario. It feels a little biased to pick your favorite team to win the finals. It's not as professional as I would like to be, but I did try to take it pretty seriously, and I see the Celtics pulling these out. I'll say it once again. I'm actually going to bring up kind of a different point. Jokic is not like Embiid in the sense that he is not a dominant scorer, as we know. He does a lot of other really good things. I think that bodes well in a Celtics matchup, considering how Robert Williams plays defense. He just doesn't allow interior scoring for the most part. He's very good at that. And when you take that away from Jokic, if I know he's been shooting the 3 really well this year, if the Nuggets are relying on Jokic to hit threes to win a series in the finals, then you already know I'm taking the Celtics because that's just not something that you've done successfully all season. It's not a way to win games. So with that being said, I think whoever wins the East is probably going to win the finals. I think that's a take I want to put on the record. And in this scenario, I would have the Celtics beating the Nuggets in 6. I don't necessarily think it's would be tight enough to go to a 7-game series, but we've seen Tatum underperform in the finals. We've seen guys like Jamal Murray overperform in the playoffs. It could be shaky, but I'll take the Celtics.
I agree with you in that. How many did you, I don't think you mentioned how many games.
Oh,
If you
I would think I might have, or I might have passed over it. I would say 6 for the
okay.
Celtics.
And I agree with you with the take. I think the East is a gauntlet, 1 through 4, very different than the West overall gauntlet, just because I think in the West, a lot of the teams have glaring holes, and it just depends on how other teams take advantage of that. I mean, 1 through 4 in the East, we talked about how good the Cavs are, and I want to talk about them for another minute. That matchup against the Bucks, I mean, Giannis, the Bucks and the Cavs, I think the Cavs might be one of the only teams that could really guard them. They have pretty much the 2 Giannis stoppers in the league. Like, they're going to be able to clog the hole. And if they can make Giannis pass the ball out, that's going to definitely help to their advantage. And if they can beat the Bucks and then they go on to play the Sixers or the Celtics, I really like the matchups against them. And like we both said, I mean, the Cavs are definitely a scary team to even make the finals. And whoever comes out of this 1 through 4 East gauntlet, I think is going to be the champions, just because they have that. Obviously, they have the first round kind of buffer to get everyone together and kind of an easy series for every single team. And then you start to really get competitive. And if you're really competitive in the second and third round and you go into the finals against a West team that we honestly, like, we both have picks, but pretty much every series I could really see going either way. And with pretty much every West team having at least 1 or 2 guys, I mean, looking at the Suns, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, guys that we just don't know injury wise if they're going to be able to play or not. And I think whoever comes out of the East, like we both said, I feel very confident that they would win the finals.
Yeah, and I just want to bring one more point up about Denver, because it wouldn't be right considering I've been gassing them up all year and had to end the segment talking bad about them. So I will say one thing good about them. Even in your explanation right there, I think you brought up amazing points, actually. I completely agree on that Cavs take. When you mentioned teams in the West who we're not sure who's playing, we're not sure about availability, I look at every team except for the Nuggets pretty much. And
Mhm.
obviously, injuries are hard to predict. They're impossible to predict. You can never really know. This has been a shocking year of health in Denver. Jokic has been healthy, Murray has been healthy, and MPJ has been healthy since the start of the year. That's never happened before. Say what you will about Denver in the playoffs. It's been poor. It's been disappointing. We have never seen health from them this year. And I think it coincides with the fact that, okay, now they're the 1 seed. Jokic is in MVP conversations because they've finally been healthy. If they keep that up in the playoffs, that bodes really well for them. I really like that about them. And I'll even say about my Celtics, who I had winning the whole thing. Health is an issue. I mean, Brown just had to get stitches in his hand. Robert Williams is going to play, but you never really know. And Al Horford, he has been healthy mostly, but when you're an older guy like that, and in these scenarios we throw out there, he's going to have to go on deep playoff runs. It gets a little nerve wracking. So that's another thing I like about the Nuggets. So I can end out the segment making sure everybody knows how much I like them.
And I guess ending our playoff predictions, obviously we'll talk about it more because I don't think either one of us are going to have a perfect playoff bracket like we talked about. These series are going to be really tough, and it's going to be fun to be able to watch them, and we can talk about them each week. So let's go into our awards. The NBA official awards don't come out until June, but we wanted to do this now, so there's absolutely no playoff bias. I know there's always the argument that the NBA does the awards in the playoffs so they can wait to see who performs, especially with like the MVP award, for example. But we're doing it now, getting complete playoff bias out of the way. And we're going to start from the bottom and we're going to work our way up. I have 1 through 3, my first, second, and third place. If you don't have all 3, that's fine. I just wanted to give a shout out to some guys too.
Yeah, and I don't have mine ranked, but I'm gonna at least mention 3 guys for every award. So
Okay.
you'll know my
So
first, and you'll know a couple others.
So we'll start off with the Sixth Man of the Year award. I would say this is a two-man race, and for me, I want to mention Bobby Portis. I think I gave him my third place vote, but he's not the same caliber as Emmanuel Quickly and Malcolm Brogdon this season in the six-man competition for me. And it really came down to the stats that I was looking at. And I think Malcolm Brogdon, I'm going to give him the award, and I'm going to go with Quickly at second, but it's really close. And both of the guys, if you just look at their stats, they're very close in pretty much every single, if you look at points, rebounds, assist. And that's why I think it's so close odds wise. I know some people heavily lean on either guy, but if I'm looking at this, both of these guys play pretty similarly, both of them averaging the same amount of points. And I think Malcolm Brogdon is just the better overall. Obviously, he's more efficient, better shooter, and he's playing less minutes. And if you're averaging pretty close stats, I'm going to give it to the guy who's playing less minutes and is more efficient.
Yeah, and I appreciate that take, but I'm gonna. It's not original if I don't have my own opinions on here. I know Quickly and Brogdon have been really good. I mean, Quickly's got 15-4-3. Brogdon's got 15-4-4. They've been exceptional both, and I wouldn't want to choose between them, so I didn't. I'm gonna take the guy that you shouted out, Bobby Portis. He's averaging 14, 10, and 2. I talked about this in a prior episode, but I'm really gonna commit to it. Really impressed with a big man putting up a double-double on the first seed in the East. And I think Bobby Portis is getting the treatment of non-guards in all NBA awards voting for a long time, but kind of always Sixth Man of the Year voting. I mean, when we think of the classic Sixth Men of the Year of all time, we think of Manu, we think of Jamal Crawford, like guards for the most part. I am really impressed with a big man getting a double-double on a team that's really solid. And I'm not going to lie, I think he has top-tier defense. I mean, that whole Bucks team, you got to take their stats with a grain of salt because they're so good defensively as a unit. They all look like they have good defensive stats. But I mean, 14, 10, and 2 is a really solid contribution. Like he's going to be, again, this is before the playoffs, but he's going to be getting serious playoff minutes against really good teams. And, you know, I like Brogdon and Quickly quite a bit, but I don't know if I'd say that about either of them. So although I'm impressed with how they are this season, I think Bobby Portis is getting kicked out of the spotlight for no reason. He would be, and I'm not just saying this for the content, like genuinely, that would be my pick.
One guy that you forgot to mention in some of the greatest six mans of all time, Lou Williams. So I just want to shout out Lou Will.
Oh yeah, and I love Lou Will, but again, another guard, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean,
so next we're gonna do our rookie teams before we go into our rookie of the year. So I guess we'll just start with, should we just do the first and second team, start with the first team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be anything on here that's highly controversial.
So my first team, I got Jalen Williams, Keegan Murray, Mathurin, Paulo, and Walker Kessler. And then on my second team, this one was a little different. I think there's a few guys that are kind of locks, but then there's a few that are kind of up in the air. So I gave them the second team. I have Jaden Ivey, AJ Griffin, Tari Eason, Jeremy Sochan, and Jalen Duren.
Yeah. So I have the exact same first team as you. I have Mathurin, Jalen Williams, Keegan Murray, Bankero, and Walker Kessler. On the second team, we look a little different. I have Jaden Ivey. I have Malachi Branham from San Antonio. I have Jabari Smith Jr. And then I have Jeremy Sochan and Jalen Duren. One thing I'll say about Malachi Branham is I know he's playing on a very poor Spurs team, and his numbers are solid, but not game changing. I'm really impressed on how he started most of the year as a shooting guard in the NBA right off the rip as a guy that coming out of, I believe, Ohio State. I could be wrong. He wasn't seen as the most NBA ready guy in the draft. So throughout his process, he was kind of seen as a project. Then he goes to San Antonio and they're like, okay, so like they're going to spend time developing him. I'm really impressed on how he's played straight off the rip. I think he can go next year and start on that San Antonio team once again. And that really caught me off guard. That's not something I expected. And with Jabari Smith Jr. being the third pick, with rumors with him going number one until the draft even happens, I think I'm a little disappointed to see him down here. And I know you left him off your list, which I think is fair, especially to include a guy like AJ Griffin, who I really struggled to keep off. But I think he was kind of thrown to the wolves. His efficiency was better than I thought it would be, and that's kind of saying a lot because his efficiency wasn't that great. I think I wasn't a big believer in him in general, and I'm impressed that he's found a role in the NBA game, which is sentiments I'll say about Keegan Murray as well, who made both of our first team. Those are two guys I didn't know how they'd fit in the NBA, and Murray more than Smith, but I think they've both done a good job so far.
Yeah, and one guy that you brought up that I had on my team, one guy that's kind of been floating around, especially with so many great, I guess, guard slash essentially wing rookies that we've seen this year. I wanted to put AJ Griffin on my list because I think I was surprised by him overall. Obviously, first round pick, 16th overall. But being on a Hawks team that wasn't great, but obviously having Trae Young in the starting lineup too. I think AJ Griffin played his role pretty well and has a lot of room to improve. I think he definitely, efficiency wise, shooting 39% from three, that's not terrible, but he definitely has some room to improve. And shooting 46.5% from the field, you would say that I think both of those are good, but he had a lot of games where he took some bad shots, but overall, his stats ended up looking good. But I think with shooting so well, but still having room to improve, I think he's going to be a good piece on this team. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to get into that starting role. He did play some good minutes on this team, but the Hawks don't really know what direction they're going in, and having two good guards in the starting lineup kind of hurts him a little bit.
Oh, and one thing I just want to throw in right there, he's been running small forward a lot this season. They have DeAndre Hunter, they have some other guys. I'm impressed that he found the court enough and was really up there. Because I mean, you look at the other rookies on our list. He's on the best team besides Keegan Murray out of anyone on my list, and he's performed very well. So I feel disappointed that he's off my list. I'm really happy you included him, so we got to talk about him. But don't count out AJ Griffin. If he got drafted to a team like San Antonio, he would be a first team guy, like genuinely.
So then we have the Rookie of the Year award, which is going to be highlighted by the Rookie of the Year. I don't think there's very much argument. We've talked about this. Paolo Banchero is the Rookie of the Year. And then I have Jalen Williams and Walker Kessler. I'm assuming very similar, but
Yeah, and if I had to put them in order, I'd put them in the same order. Paulo, he shot horrible from three this year, like the worst in the league, and still found a way to contribute. I think Orlando's moving in the right direction because of his play. And statistically, he kind of wipes everyone else that has a chance.
yeah. And obviously there's an argument if Jalen Williams had the same amount of minutes, but that's just Paolo was the best player in the draft. He went where he went for a reason. He's on a team that needed him to play as many minutes and kind of be the best player right away. And that's the role that he got put into. You can't knock him for that. And if Jalen Williams played that many minutes, I don't know if he would be that efficient because he has a specific role that he's playing and he's playing it very well. And also, I want to talk about Walker Kessler, obviously third, played very well this season. And I think we both had him obviously on the first team. But all three of these guys, great years as a rookie. And I think Paolo having one of the best rookie years in a while. And I think it's really scary to look at. We both talked about it throughout the year and even now too, his inefficiency, but still being able to put up that many points and that big of an impact. Once this guy gets it down, he's going to be a very good player in the league.
Yeah, and one thing about Walker Kessler I want to throw out, I mean, he gets drafted by Minnesota. Obviously, he's in that Rudy Gobert deal. And, I mean, we're looking at a guy that played better than Rudy Gobert this year as a rookie. So talk about filling your role. He wasn't meant to be the number one option like Paulo was, in the same way Jalen Williams wasn't. Both of those guys played their role really well. Sometimes you're just asked to play a bigger role. And I think that's another plus in Paulo's column.
So next we have the defensive teams. We'll go through the first and second team. And I just want to say this now because we didn't really have much issues with the rookie teams. But personally, I think we both did it. The way that we set it up is we had two guards and then three bigs for all the teams. And just getting it out there now, we didn't want to put Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic we didn't want to have to put, I guess, essentially Embiid or Jokic on the second team. And next year they'll be completely positionless, but we've pretty much done this every year that we've done rankings. It's just, I think you can't have one of those guys off the list. And I wanted to bring that up because I'm going to have three bigs and arguably two centers on my all defensive first team. So I want to start with my first team. I got Drew Holiday, Marcus Smart, Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Brooke Lopez. And then on my second team, I have Jaden McDaniels, OG Anunoby, Bam Adebayo, Giannis, and Nick Claxton. And I want to talk about my first team a little bit. The guards this year, it was very interesting. Like you said, Marcus Smart kind of having a down year. He's still one of the best defensive players in the league, obviously winning Defensive Player of the Year last year. And Drew Holiday, another one of the best guards in the league. I put Jaden McDaniels on my second team. He was very close, but I wanted to give him the credit that I think is due. He's kind of been a very underrated defender this year in the league. And obviously he's going to be out now with an injury for the play-in game. I'll blame Rudy Gobert for that. But I think he had a great year, and I wanted to kind of put some spotlight on him. And OG Anunoby was very good defensively at the start of this year. I know he was up there in even the top three odds for Defensive Player of the Year. He kind of took a little bit of a nosedive in, I guess, recently, the past few months, but I still think he's one of the best defensive guards. And Nick Claxton, too. I had him on my second team. And just an overall great player, and I think very good defensive talent. And it was hard for me because I think he could definitely sneak onto that first team. But when I talk about my Defensive Player of the Year, I have Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson, and Brooke Lopez on the first team. There's no room for Nick Claxton up there. But I think second team, obviously, that's not a low achievement. That's still very good.
Yeah, and you know me, I've always been a big Nick Claxton supporter. Been talking about him for a while now. I really wanted to force him on that first team. Even in my rankings, I couldn't. With that being said, my first team is interesting, and I'm going to want to talk about that as well. My first team, I have Drew Holiday, I have Derek White, I have OG Anunoby, Jaren Jackson, and Brooke Lopez. On my second team, I have Marcus Smart, Herb Jones, Jaden McDaniels, Bam, and Nick Claxton. Just to talk about this, I think the thing that stands out is something I'm not seeing a lot of people predict, and I have Derek White on the first team and Marcus Smart on the second team. Just as someone that's watched the games this year, I understand Derek White fills a role where he comes off the bench more often, but Derek White played every game this year, all 82, and without fail, guards could not score on him. Like, for someone who is probably, I think it's easy to say a worse player than Marcus Smart, his ability to shut down threats on the offensive side was much better this year. Historically, I mean, we know we saw Smart win DPOY last year. You know, he's known as a better defender, but when it comes to the way they actually play the game, I'm much more impressed with Derek White this year. I think advanced statistically, he even has some stuff that favors his way. So I went with that. And on the second team, you talked about Jaden McDaniels. I thought I was going to get to do that. I haven't seen as much buzz about him this year. But for all the reasons you mentioned, he's an amazing defender. I put him in at a forward spot. He's played guard, forward, 2, 3. Yeah. So I respect that. And then Herb Jones. I mean, it was very trendy last year to talk about Herb Jones defensively, and he quietly has been better this year. So I think people were just kind of tired. They kind of forgot about him more than anything. When this year he's been on a Pelicans team who I think has taken leaps and bounds because Herb Jones has been able to be so effective on the defensive side. He's one of the only guys in the league right now that I could argue could guard 1 through 5. 5 would be tough, but you get the idea. So I just want to give him some credit. I left Giannis off. That was the big one I was kind of upset about, because Giannis, you could argue, is a top 5 defender in the league, and I wouldn't even be mad. But there were so many forwards on here I wanted to highlight that I just couldn't put them on.
So who was your first team bigs, I guess is my question.
So I ran 2 guards, 3 forwards / bigs. I have OG Anunoby as a small forward.
Okay.
So it was him, Triple J, and Brooke Lopez.
So did you have Evan Mobley at all on the list? That's one name that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I knew we were gonna have to talk about this. I did not. And this is not me trying to make a whole statement or anything, because I think Evan Mobley's a great defender. You having him in your top 3 Defensive Player of the Year is makes a lot of sense to me. I kind of ran it where I was going to run a small forward and maximum 2 bigs, so I couldn't get him on the first team. and I'd spoil it, but Jaren Jackson, Brook Lopez above him. So I'm looking at the second team, and I'm just doing a deep dive, and it's like he has the blocks, but I want to throw this out there. I attribute a lot of his defensive success to Jared Allen's defensive success, and that is no knock on Evan Mobley. I mean, you get good teammates, you're supposed to work with them. But if we're talking individually, better defensive players, I understand Evan Mobley, and I don't want to die on this hill because I really respect the opinion. But I don't know. I think he highlights more of a really good Cavs team. And that's the same reason we don't see Giannis on here because he's a great defender. But I distribute it more to a really good defensive Bucks team as I have two of them on my first team, and so do you. So I guess that's just my reasoning on that. But I'll say it once again, make it abundantly clear. I understand it's kind of weird.
So then we'll go into Defensive Player of the Year. I think this one's another easy wrap-up award. Jaren Jackson Jr., I have him at first. And then at 2 and 3, I have Brook Lopez and Evan Mobley, which was highlighted in my first overall defensive team. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. took a huge step this season. Looking at the preseason odds for Defensive Player of the Year, he wasn't even close to being a favorite. I don't even think he was top 5. I think he was maybe top 10. He was completely out of it. And he stepped up, and with a team that has been conflicted with whether it's injuries, off the court stuff, he's been there and he's been holding down the anchor, and he's the man in the middle, and he's been playing great this year. And overall, obviously highlighting Brook Lopez and Evan Mobley. We just talked about Evan Mobley, but Brook Lopez too. That's why this Bucks team is so scary. Just so many great defensive players overall.
Yeah, and I think one thing I will say is that it's kind of sad that this is considered a healthy season for Jaren Jackson Jr. because he still missed some time towards the middle of the year. With that being said, he's been historically injury riddled, and he's been pretty healthy this year. So we got to see a full season of his defensive impact, and it was huge. I mean, he was absolutely unbelievable. We had a lot of jokes earlier in the season about his stat padding stuff, whether he got to decide that or not. But once you go past the jokes and you just watch the game, he passes every eye test. Then you listen to your eyes, check the stats. He leads every stat. There's almost no argument for anyone else. I have Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday as my 2 and 3. Again, you can talk about team impact. I think they are the team impact. I mean, both sides of the spectrum, you have the point guard and the center, and they're the best defensive point guard and the best defensive center in the league. So I want to give them some credit there. Once again, Mobley, he's a really solid defender as well. No hate towards him, but I don't even think it's close. You average a flat 3 blocks and a steal a night while being the man in the middle, being the anchor on a team that's one of the better teams in the whole league, especially how he continued to give them success while Ja was out with suspension stuff. And his defense allowed them to win old school, grit and grind sort of Grizzlies games. That's all I needed to see. I was already going to pick him, but that whole stretch, I haven't even thought of anyone else since that stretch happened.
Yeah. And like you said, kind of riddled with injuries, and he's been next up for a while. So it's really good to see him finally have a season where he can go out there and just be able to play healthy, and we get to see how good he really is.
Yeah, you could just say he was the next man up.
He is the next. We got another guy that's going to be the next man up. We'll have to decide
right.
who it is, since Jaren Jackson just won our next man up award, but we'll decide who it is for next year.
Word.
And an award I want to get out of the way. Obviously, we're not going to have a coach of the year first and second team, but we're just going to have the coach of the year award. I have Mike Brown as my coach of the year. I didn't have a second and third overall, but I guess just a few guys that we could shout out this year. Not Doc Rivers, not Darvin Ham. Those guys are definitely not coach of the year worthy. So, but just talking about Mike Brown, we've talked about him a lot, and he's been an amazing coach. He's been able to bring this team to success that no one saw before this season. We all thought they'd be pretty good, but I guess a team success overall and individual player development, this team has just been amazing, and he's the head of the team. So I don't really see an argument against him.
Yeah, I want to bring up some guys. Joe Mazzulla on the Celtics, Tom Thibodeau on the Knicks. I hate him. I'll just say it on the podcast. He's my least favorite coach ever. But I have to be nice. It's a Knicks team that's overperformed this year, and I actually think he's been better than usual. With that being said, I think you said it better than I even could have. It's a playoff drought that almost hit 20 years, and it was a lot of team success, but he led that group of guys together that broke them out of it. He's always been a great coach. We mentioned in a later episode how he started as being seen as a horrible coach in his Cavs days, then earned a lot of respect with his Warriors days. And now here he is leading a team much higher than either of us saw. So, with that being said, it's got to be Mike Brown. I won't argue for a second on that.
Yeah, and another guy that I want to kind of mention too, JB Bickerstaff, a Cavs team too that not as much success as the Kings, I would say, like record wise and stuff, but a pretty, I would say, equal equivalent if you look at the East, a team that could definitely make a dangerous run.
Yeah, and if we look towards the future, I mean, I would not be surprised if JP Bickerstaff gets one. Honestly,
Yeah.
like even next year. So he's a great coach as well. I'm glad you gave him some credit there.
And before we get into the All NBA teams and the MVP award, we're going to go through the Most Improved Player of the Year award. One that's pretty close, I would say, compared to the past awards that we've done. So my top three, at three, I have Mikal Bridges. I would say that he's taken a big step up this season, and especially going to a Nets team after the trade deadline, or I guess before the trade deadline, but playing on the team where he could have easily just been mid for the rest of the year with the Nets not really being able to compete. Obviously, they're in the playoffs because of their start of the season success. But if you have this team throughout the year, maybe they're an 8th seed, they're a play-in team. But for him to be able to play at such a high level and go to a new team where they had no expectations and kind of step up his levels, he's been amazing since he's been on the Nets. And he's a really fun player to watch. So I wanted to mention him. And then the one and the two, the guys that we've kind of been talking about the past few weeks, Lauri Markkanen and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the best guards in the league right now, and we'll highlight that with our All NBA teams. But overall, I'm going to give it to Lauri Markkanen. I think I gave him this award when we've been talking about it unofficially the past few weeks, and they both taken big steps. But Lauri has completely redefined his career, especially after this move, playing on a team where just another team that really didn't have much going for them, and he's been able to. Obviously, they didn't have that much success this year, but still playing great overall.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight Jalen Brunson. I think if he got an All-Star game nod, like he really almost could have, it
Yeah.
would be a different conversation. But with that being said, I think we have very similar notes here. I'm a huge Shai Alexander fan. I really root for him, and I've been seeing it since last year, and this is my biggest knock towards him. By last year, we knew he was going to be this guy. So although he did take a very big and impressive jump, I think we were ready for it, you know. And I think how we saw the award go to John Morant last year has changed our perception of it a little bit. I really think the most improved award should be, if there is a player that fits this category, should be given to a guy that goes from, role player ish, like you don't really know what's going on, to star. And say what you will about Markkanen, he was an all-star starter in the hometown city. So I think that on its own, from being, a small trade piece and a random trade that we already forget the details of, to all-star starter, that's got to be enough for most improved player, or else I don't understand what the award means anymore.
Yeah. And we've kind of talked about this, kind of redefining, bringing the most improved player back to what you said, kind of a guy who's on the edge, but then essentially redefines his career with a career year. So I think it's good. And Jalen Brunson too. It was tough between him and Mikal Bridges for my third spot overall, but because they've both been great this year. But I just give the nod to Mikal Bridges. But Jalen Brunson, if I had to pick a fourth, he would definitely be the fourth.
Oh yeah.
So now we have the All NBA teams, and we're gonna do this. I think we should do this a little different. We'll both do our first teams and then second teams. I think our first team is identical though, unless anything
I'm
has
pretty
changed.
confident.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty confident.
So we'll just talk about this. I'll give us the list and then we can talk about it. Our two guards that we have Luka Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, both great players. This season putting up pretty great overall scoring numbers, where in any other season they would probably be the scoring leader. But since there is so many players this year that scored so many points, they've just kind of been, I mean, they're still going to be top 5. I think the way that it ended, Luka was number 2. Shea having a great breakout season. We already knew he was going to be good, but now people overall kind of know how great he can be. And then our next 3 guys, I mean, the top 3 MVP favorites, we have Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid. And we did this so we could have 3 bigs on the list, because I'm not going to bump Embiid or Jokic out of the first team. I don't think I know that the NBA will, the way that they do it, but I guess next year, with it being positionless, we can finally see the 5 best players.
Yeah, and I just want to bring this up because we don't have a note on it for the rest of the episode. I'm so happy about the NBA going positionless for the teams. I think it's incredibly important for the reason you just mentioned. Like, we're in an era of time where this is the first time in a long time we've had the 2 best players in the league, debatably, like 2 MVP favorites, be 2 centers. And the fact